Well, welcome all. I'm so glad you've come to join us today for worship service. I am now going to mute everybody as we will begin our service. Our music director, David Chapman, will begin the service this morning by playing for us In Summer from Frozen by Kristen and Robert Lopez. David?
Thank you, David, for that in-gathering music. If you've never heard that before, well, then you probably haven't been around children in the last 7 years. Good morning. Welcome to Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church, meeting in cyberspace this morning. I'm Clark Ritz, one of 7 worship associates on a team that works with the minister and the church staff to bring you services like this one, even when it's best we don't meet in person. We strive to be a welcoming community. Whoever you are, whoever you love, you're welcome here. Whatever your beliefs or gender identity, you are welcome here. Wherever you were born, whatever your race, whatever your physical ability, you're welcome here. Speaking of here, we acknowledge that though we're not in our physical church spaces, that the land where our church building stands is the ancestral home of the Piscataway people, who have a history in the region stretching from the Potomac River to the Chesapeake Bay, going back thousands of years. And I also want to acknowledge that last Friday was Juneteenth, a commemoration of the day that enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation finally reached Texas, years after the proclamation had been issued. Whatever brought you online this morning, we're glad you decided to share the morning with us. Before we move into worship, let's brush up on our Zoom. Find your mute button, it's the microphone icon. Make sure you're muted. Find the bubble for your chat screen. These are in different places on your screen, depending on what kind of device you're using. You can set your own pace for reading the chats by scrolling up and down. You may be able to mute the chats if they distract you. You may also be able to change what you see on your screen from speaker to gallery view, which may let you see more than one person at a time, unless the host is trying to spotlight a single speaker. And just a reminder that we're recording and we're on Facebook Live. So right now in chat, please say how many people are in attendance via your connection. 1, if it's just you. That way we can get a sense of how many people are attending the service. I see them scrolling along. Thank you. If you're visiting us for the first or second time, let us know. And you can contact the church office if you'd like someone to reach out to you with more information. After the service today, instead of coffee hour and breakout rooms, we'll hear more from Barry, who's consulting with us on our readiness for a capital campaign. So stay on Zoom if you'd like to hear more about that. And now, our minister, Reverend Rachel Christensen, will call us to worship.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Rachel Christensen. I'm the minister here at Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church, and I'm delighted to be with you today. Thank you for joining us today. In my window, I see touches of sunshine and definitely some breeze. It seems like it will be a beautiful day. I realize that today is Father's Day, and I'm celebrating my husband, Eric, and father of our 3 boys. And I'm remembering a story I heard about how Mother's Day is often in churches all about the wonderfulness of mothers. And Father's Day is often devoted to how people could be or should be better fathers. And I just hate that. I think that Mother's Day this year, we worked hard to talk about how to do caregiving and caring, and sort of renamed it Caring Day or Carers Day. So I remember that when I think of Father's Day. But happy Father's Day, all you fathers out there, and for all of us remembering our own fathers and the impact they had on our lives. And on NPR, I heard a report of New York Philharmonic's clarinetist, Anthony McGill, and he posted a video of himself playing a mournful rendition of America the Beautiful. And then he dropped to both knees, holding his clarinet behind his back. He lowered his head as if in prayer, hands behind his back as if handcuffed with his clarinet. It was deeply moving. And he urged his fellow musicians to also make a statement about the tragedies of this year, the failure to make systemic changes, and the power of artists to share their own grief. He noted that Colin Kaepernick took one knee playing football and lost his job. Several of us have taken a knee to acknowledge the murder of George Floyd. Anthony McGill says that maybe one knee is not enough. Perhaps we should take 2 knees. Here is the principal tenor from the Metropolitan Opera taking 2 knees in answer to Anthony McGill. Lawrence Brownlee performs There's a Man Going Round Taking Names by Huddie, Leadbelly, Ledbetter.
There's a man going round taking names. There's a man going round taking names. He has taken my brother's name, and it's left my heart in pain. There's a man going round taking names.
I'm lighting a chalice here, and I invite you to do so in your own space. Please stay muted in Zoom, but do join me in reciting our chalice lighting words that will appear on your screen. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open mind, the helping hands, the loving heart, and the radiant spirit. Encendamos este caliz para celebrar el Unitarismo Universalismo. Esta es la iglesia de la mente abierta, de las manos amigas, del amor, del corazón y del espíritu radiante. What a week, what a month, what a year. And today's Father's Day too. So happy Father's Day to all the dads and to anyone who plays that role in someone's life. There's so much we could talk about and so many momentous things going on that give me hope and also sorrow. Today, though, we're thinking about the possibility of a capital campaign. In simple terms, can this congregation raise a substantial chunk of money? So I'm going to tell a story about my family's experience with a capital campaign in our previous congregation. The church we were part of had burned through a string of several interim ministers going back well before we got there. One of the departing ministers delivered an even-toned but quite pointed sermon asking the congregation if it had considered that maybe the problem wasn't the ministers. The next minister committed suicide while serving the congregation. Some dedicated, tireless lay leaders in the church were law enforcement officers, and there were tensions over the Black Lives Matter movement in the congregation. On top of all that, the physical church building was sinking into the ocean. It was on an inlet, and with subsidence and sea level rise, high tides regularly flooded the surrounding streets, cutting off the parking lot. There was trauma and loss and tension, but the church needed to move, literally, physically, pull up roots and move to a new building. So there was a capital campaign. A lot of hard work went into it. The community came together. There were some holdouts about the move, but the congregation worked through it. One couple in the church announced that they'd put up a 6-figure matching fund partway through. I don't recall what the final numbers were, or if they needed a mortgage in the end, but they were looking for something over $1 million to buy a new church property, renovate it, and move. We contributed to that campaign, our family. It was a really easy conversation with Megan. It only took a minute. It went something like, hey, I think we should contribute probably kind of a lot. And I think Megan threw out a number that was maybe 2/3 above our annual pledge over again. And I said, yeah, that's about right. That was that. Easy decision. That congregation did it. It's a beautiful new building, gorgeous grounds. Church is settling a minister right now. The children's religious education program there looks vibrant. They even changed the name after moving to reflect the larger area that the church now serves. I'm so happy to see them thriving. We've never been to a service in that new building. We knew that we wouldn't. We helped out with the early groundskeeping work as the renovation started, but we knew full well that the clock on my work assignment down there was running out, and that we'd be moving back up to this area before the church could move. That didn't matter. Our community needed us, and our community was important to us. We felt like that area needed a great UU church. It was a no-brainer way to make the world a better place. I know that right now is a difficult time in many ways for many people. I believe that some people feel strained relationships in our congregation. And I do remember the discussion of finances from last week's annual meeting. And yet, I'll be so bold as to say, I think that that capital campaign helped our last church through a difficult time. Now, let us join our hearts and minds in a time of prayer and meditation. As we gather in community, we carry with us life's hurts and its great joys. Sometimes sharing these joys and concerns in community can help. You're now welcome to share your written joys and sorrows in the chat bar. Barry Finkelstein is also sharing a gift of music with us today, in addition to his insights. This morning's intonation music will be a medley of two klezmer tunes, Ma Yofus, which means how beautiful, and Mazel Tov, number 1, which means good luck. So we're leaning more into the joys this morning. Barry?
Go ahead, Barry, you're on. Barry, we can't hear you. I don't know if your mic came loose. Still no sound. We see your lips moving. I can't hear you. You're unmuted.
In the audio settings, you may be able to select a different microphone. It may have gotten tripped up.
I wonder, Clark and Barry.
How about now?
Oh, we found you. Thank you.
I think when I change to real sound, anyway, I'll play.
Thank you. Marvelous.
Shall I start over?
Please.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Let us take a moment to acknowledge all that has been shared, as well as those joys and sorrows that remain unspoken and yet are on our minds and in our hearts. May we hold all these and one another in love and kindness, so that this congregation may be a source of strength and comfort, courage and hope in the days and weeks ahead. So again, thank you, Barry. And as he resets to share some of his thoughts with us, I'm going to tell you a story. It starts with our children. Now, our prior director of religious education, Chris McCann, joked, half joked maybe, that she was starting a plot to have our kids take over the church. At the very least, a plot to make their voices heard and let them know that they're an important part of our congregation. In a spirit of stewardship of our church and grounds, the children and youth of this congregation were asked what they were concerned about. They pointed out that the bridge in the Glen where they like to play. It goes over a little creek down there, and it's in bad shape. It's probably not very safe. These kids got a meeting with adults from the Building and Grounds Committee and brought them down to have a look at it. They didn't just want to replace it. They were concerned that it was too low and it blocked the flow of water and it might affect the wildlife in the creek. The new bridge, they thought, should be higher, wider to leave more room. Maybe it should be covered and have a structure over it to protect it. They had lots of ideas. Erin Reese, who you may know as the spouse of Chris McCann, committed to working on this project with the kids. So if you're one of those kids who started this project, thank you. And keep up the good work in making the grown-ups listen to you. You are part of the community and part of the stewardship of our church, and we thank you. Now, this was all before COVID hit, so the old bridge is still there for the moment. I don't know how this story ends yet, not exactly. I know it started with some children and something they cared about, and I bet you this story ends with a whole congregation. And now, Barry will share with us some thoughts on our next steps.
Thank you, Clark. I assume you can all hear me now. Sorry, sorry about that before. The joys of technology, right? Well, I have to start by saying that it seems like Clark did most of my work for me by telling his story of his earlier congregation, because you'll see as I go on here, both during the worship service and also afterwards in my reporting to you, that a big part of my message is about the magic of capital campaigns. And I think that Clark's story kind of reinforces that. So it's been good to be with you this week. I'm Barry Finkelstein. As you have heard, I'm one of the Unitarian Universalist stewardship consultants. I think of myself as one of the crazy people who likes to wander around among our Unitarian Universalist congregations and talk about money. I love doing this work. I'll share with you a little bit of my story and how I got here. I'm always looking for converts. So in sharing my story, I'm always looking for people who might choose to join me in this quest of talking about money among Unitarian Universalists. But as I said, it was really good to be with you this week. I missed being with you in person, but I was amazed at how well we were able to be together in Zoom sessions. We had all of the meetings that I would normally have conducted during a very intense weekend done during this past week. And I got to meet with, by my count, somewhere right around 50 people. So more than a quarter of your membership. And I learned quite a bit about Paint Branch and all the things that you were doing. And I came away energized, as I always do when spending a week or a weekend with Unitarian Universalists. So let me talk a little bit about stewardship. Stewardship has become my ministry. And to be honest, it didn't start that way. When I started out as a Unitarian Universalist, my main area of focus, my interest was social justice, which I assume many of you can recognize. I know Paint Branch has a strong tradition of social justice, and I read lots about your history and about your current work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But social justice was my entree to Unitarian Universalism. And then I also loved working. I did some religious education work. I'm an owl teacher. And as you know, I do some music in church. But what what has taken hold for me is the stewardship ministry, as I call it. And so how did I get from a social justice person to being a stewardship person? Because today, really, my spirituality and my faith commitment revolve largely around those two things, around social justice and stewardship, with a little bit of these other things thrown in. And I believe that the two go together perfectly. Now, I ask you to think about the impact that we, Unitarian Universalists, a small denomination, think about the impact that we have had on issues in the larger society. Think about the work we have done for marriage equality. My wife and I have lived in many states, and we've seen civil union laws come and go. We've seen marriage equality come and go. And in all of these places, Unitarian Universalists were in the forefront. And I am quite confident that we had a major role to play in making marriage equality happen. We also have done lots of good work in many other areas: racial justice, reproductive and women's rights, mass incarceration. Think about the things that we are working on today. I heard stories this week about your work to address systemic racism and white supremacy, things that have moved, issues that have moved right to the forefront in these last couple of very difficult weeks. And the work that you're doing to promote radical, what I call radical inclusiveness within your community. So this is where my passion for stewardship comes in. I ask myself, what does it take for us to be the transforming force that we are and hope to be in our lives and in the world? Well, one thing I know is that it takes stewardship. It takes resources. It takes the commitment of our gifts and our call, all of our gifts, including our time, our presence, our talents, our energy, and yes, our money. In addition to the work in the world, think about the work that this congregation does for each of you in your personal lives. I heard moving stories this week about lives transformed and people lovingly supported here, about weddings, about support for transgender children, about support for people with all kinds of interests and needs and goals and objectives in their lives. This is your community. This is your family. You have so much to be proud of. The power of community was cited most often among the strengths of Paint Branch in my conversations with people this week. Now imagine how much more we could accomplish with additional resources, with additional investment. Well, that's why I work on stewardship, to help you and other UU congregations take our value proposition, as we say in the business world, to the next level. Now, while I love talking about all things stewardship, I am especially fond of capital campaigns and think that and have seen the magic that they produce in congregations. I'm going to tell you a story that's a little different than Clark's story, but it has the same oomph to it. And this happened long before I was a stewardship consultant. I was a member of a congregation in the Washington, D.C. area, and we were about to embark on a large capital campaign and a building program. This was a $3 million program back in the 1980s. So this was a huge project. And this was a large congregation, about 600 members at the time. And I would say that roughly 15% of the members were totally opposed to this project. They thought if we could raise $3 million, the last thing we should do is build ourselves a building, that we should do good things in the community as we had been doing. We should use that money for other things. And I thought, as a relatively new member and a novice at this, that this was an impasse that could never possibly be resolved. But I'll tell you that just as Clark described, over the next 3 months, we spent 3 months on this. We had lots of conversations in person, one-on-one conversations, small groups, large groups, things through the newsletter. We had all kinds of conversations. And at the end of the time, we were ready to move forward. And some of those 100 or so people came on board and were supportive of the plan, and some did not. But everybody supported the program once it got done. And nobody left. Not a single member left the church. And I was just blown away by that. The building got built. The community was stronger than ever at the end of it. And I have seen this over and over and over again. I have worked on about 20 to 25 capital campaigns with Unitarian Universalist congregations, and the magic always comes. The money also comes, but more important, the magic comes, and the community building and community strengthening is what comes. Now, I find that Unitarian Universalists are more generous and more willing to support capital campaigns in a big way, again, much as Clark described, surprisingly. And it's also surprisingly easy to talk to people about capital campaign money. What I have found is that even though we're talking about large gifts, we're talking about 5-figure gifts and 6-figure gifts in some places, while we're also talking about small gifts, because 100% participation is really super important. It's easy to talk to people about this for a lot of reasons. One is that it's future oriented. People like that. The second is it's one time, and then it's tangible. Usually some tangible thing is to be produced as a result of this investment. And then fourth, it really is an investment. People feel like it's an opportunity, a unique opportunity, a once a generation opportunity, I like to say, to invest in our faith and in our congregations that we love so much, and to build something for the future that will live on beyond us. Now, I have to say that it's a little bit hard to evaluate capital campaigns in the time that we're in right now. And that's definitely a challenge for me as a consultant, and it will be a challenge for you as a congregation. And we talked a bit about this during the week. I don't have all the answers for you. Nobody has all the answers. We're in really unprecedented territory here. But the good news is we do know the steps to creating a successful capital campaign. And we know how to get from here to there. What we don't know is how to translate those steps into the world that we're in now. But I do think that that having this long history of successful capital campaigns and a willingness to work together, a willingness to be transformed into the virtual universe, as we have all been over the last 3 months, I think we can get through this. It may take longer. It may be a different process in some ways, but I think we can move this forward just as we've moved this week forward. And I do think that, again, people are motivated right now to support Unitarian Universalism. We've seen a big uptick in interest in our congregation since the 2016 election, and even more so in the last few weeks. We are called on to be a source of solace and a source of resistance and a sanctuary for the vulnerable, to stand up to hate and bigotry and fear. And investing in our congregations at this time is certainly a good thing. Now, let me tell you 4 things that are key to success. And I won't talk in great detail about this. I'll talk more about this after the service during my reporting to you. But I wanted to call your attention to 4 things that help make capital campaigns successful. One is leadership. Strong leadership, professional, ministerial, and lay leadership, committed leadership, people who can move a process forward and have the confidence of the congregation. So leadership is key. Trust is key. Trust is a really big thing. Trust in one another, trust in the process. I know you've been working on issues of trust and conflict, and I think that all those things will help you build the kind of trust that's required to do this work. Communication, the big part of the campaign and the pre-campaign is communicating with one another, talking, just like I talked about the magic of talking in my earlier congregation. Education, inspiration, all these communication issues are critical. And then energy and focus. We have to find the energy to really focus on these campaigns, or it's going to be very difficult to do it. So I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. Think about the people who built the building that you love today, your beautiful campus. I got a chance to have a virtual tour of the campus. I was on your campus about 30 years ago, but it was nice to see a virtual tour of it. I got a chance to do that this week. It's a beautiful facility, a beautiful campus. Think about the people who invested in where you are today and the leap of faith that they made in order to do that. Imagine what it took to get to the place where you are now. So I ask you, isn't it your time to take the next steps into an even more wonderful future? Don't we owe it to those who came before, and more importantly, to those who will come after? So I ask you, is there a better investment that you can make? Is there a better way to use your financial resources than to promote your deepest values through Paint Branch? So please join me further after the service, and we'll talk some more about what I have learned about you and what I recommend going forward. Oh, and now, please join. We'll be singing hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry, and the words will appear on your screen.
You're muted, Rachel. You are muted, Rachel. Can't hear you.
How about now? 3 times is the charm, maybe. I just wanted to say thank you to David for playing that song. I love that song and remember it so clearly as a congregation as we sing it. But when I'm sitting here at home alone, singing the words to myself and listening to the piano, it somehow feels very long. So maybe you felt the same way. The question today is, how do we, I am having technical difficulties here. And I'm going to get there in a minute. But I got to get there in order to make this work. Okay. So how do we build a dream? We build a dream one step at a time. We have been working on these steps here at Paint Branch for, well, really from the beginning. The congregation began meeting in a building at the University of Maryland when it was really just a dream. And then in about 1958, about the time that Lowell and Marge Owens joined the church, people found this property, the one on Powder Mill, and dreamed about putting a building on it for a church. It wasn't until 1961 that the building was actually done. It took planning and fundraising and designing and a lot of hard work. It is said that the architect thought the congregation was all about being together, including each other, and that the only form that made sense to them was a circle where everyone was included. And so we have a building made of a series of circles constructed in an arc that reaches out to include the Glen. The church grew and outgrew that building when what is now called the Kelly Room was the sanctuary. Betty Young told the story yesterday that she remembers when the choir was singing for 2 services every week, and she loved it. It became clear that it was time to build a larger sanctuary, and in 1991, our beloved meeting house was finally constructed. It took planning and fundraising and designing and a lot of hard work. We borrowed money to help build the meeting house, and in the end had to host a series of ethnic dinners to raise the money to finish the kitchen. The basement would have to wait. Almost since the completion of the meeting house, or maybe since the completion of the kitchen, we have been thinking about and wanting to finish the basement. There was progress, and then there were setbacks. There was the fire, and the issue with the school renting space. There was the Crystal Cathedral, another big dream. And Diane had her stroke. And now we are in a pandemic. Sometimes it may feel like Paint Branch is snake bit. But through it all, the congregation has been filled with people who are committed, people who are fed by the community, children who have energized us, social justice commitments that required our focus and our voice. Since last year, and actually long before that, we have been working on conflict and race. They have both taken their toll and sharpened our focus. We have been working to understand how race and racism shows up at Paint Branch and how to be in better relationship with each other. I have personally been schooled about my own failure to see and act on racism, a difficult lesson for everyone involved, and I am grateful for the chance to learn. And all too often, conflict has resulted in rupture in the fabric of the church community, with someone deciding it isn't worth it and it's time to leave. Today, we are actively working on these things with the new policies on right relations and destructive behaviors, with the new community relations team offering help in facilitating conversations across conflict, with the upcoming help from a consultant in assessing our systems our systemic issues around race. These actions hold the hope of strengthening the community at really deep core levels. They are the stuff of building trust, deepening relationships, working through missteps and sadness, creating openings for renewed commitment, and building a vision for the future, rebuilding at the root level to strengthen our foundation. As we do this work, we will also be doing the next steps on the capital project. Each of these steps is incremental as the congregation decides what to do next. We must shore up the deck to give us time to figure out the larger plan. This will cost some money, but will buy us time for figuring things out. We will work on defining who we are. What do we really want as a congregation? What is our mission? What role can we play in the community? What is it that we can get excited about? What do we really need to be a paint branch? How will we engage to serve the community, to provide a foundation of liberal religion, to better serve in areas of social justice and in racial justice? We will work on defining what we need in the way of a physical plant in order to do these things. What do we need in the way of space and a building to be the congregation we can be? What are you excited about? How will accessing the basement help us to implement our mission? Are there other ways to do that? To make it accessible, to finish it for our purposes? Who's excited about it? And how can we make it happen? We will listen to each other, have deep conversations about how we want to use our space and our money, about our values, and begin to trust one another again, to be able to work through past hurts and mistrust and identify where the energy lies. This pandemic will end. And as we work through this time, we will find that we are forever changed. I don't believe we will ever do church again without also providing online church. I think we will always have a way to post our joys and sorrows in the chat, and maybe a way to show them in our sanctuary. We might find we bring in more people to our in-person services, or we might find that we use space so differently that we want something completely different in order to live into our mission. Our next steps are to take the time to do the deep work we are doing now regarding conflict and race, to learn more about how we can be faithful, multiracial, multicultural congregation, to take the time to figure out what and who we are and what our acts of generosity and faith will look like in this season and in this time. Small steps, incremental, some about money, some about the future, some about ourselves and our relationships and our foundational connections. We will work as we seek understanding, connection, and possibility. May it be so.
We have a special collection this morning for Capital Pride Alliance. It is particularly fitting that this past week also marked the Supreme Court decision ruling that federal law prohibits discrimination against gay and transgender people in the workplace. This Father's Day also brings back a powerful memory I have of going out with a group of guys to celebrate our recently transitioned transgender friend on his first Father's Day. So this Supreme Court decision brings me joy, even though this step was a long time coming. But there are more steps to take, and Phil will put the information for contributing to Capital Pride Alliance in the chat window. It's also in the order of service on the website. The mission of this church carries on in these uncertain times and is more important than ever. We're grateful to have the financial support of members and friends. Please give as generously as you're able. Phil will post the information in the chat. And before David begins to play, I will read the chorus from the offertory song. So that reads, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know I will love you still. You can live by yourself. You can gather friends around. You can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done.
Thank you, David. About a month ago, we decided to all unmute ourselves and sing Spirit of Life together. And we're going to do that today. But before you do that, I want to remind you that after the service, we will stay in this space for more conversation with Barry Finkelstein and hear more about the next steps for us as a congregation in pursuing a capital funds drive and a capital project. So, but right now, I invite everybody to turn on your video if you've turned it off, and to unmute yourselves, and we will all sing together the English Spirit of Life. You might turn on your view to gallery view so you can see each other. We will not display the words for this so that we can remember who we are together in community. David?
How many verses?
One verse, English only.
Okay.
Unmute yourself.
Come unto me, my heart,
Of compassion,
shameful justice.
set me free, Spirit of life,
Come to me.
That's worse than
It's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, horrible.
Being in community.
Oh, it's distinguished our chalice here. And I invite you to stay with us and hear from Barry.